Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Wednesday, and that means Epic Comic Book Wednesday. This is a series of videos where Michael K Vaughan and I combine the forces of stately Vaughan Manor and Hyde Cottage to talk about comics. Some theme, some character, some run, some particular issue. Whatever strikes Mike's fancy. He's the one who picks what we talk about, and when he picked today's subject, at first, my initial reaction was, well, of course, because today's subject is Conan the Barbarian, the immortal creation of Robert E. Howard, who Michael K. Vaughan loves dearly. So that makes perfect sense. But it was the specific comic book iteration of Conan that gave me pause, that made me think maybe I was losing my mind because I'd somehow blanked on it. I now understand why I blanked on it out of rage. But at first, the run that he's talking about is written by Brian Wood and drawn by Becky Cloonan for Dark Horse Comics starting in 2012. And I have the first 4 or 5 issues of that run in the long boxes that I didn't bother to go through. But I had blanked on it because it's trouble. We have a lot to talk about with this particular little mini run on Conan the Barbarian. Not at all meant to be conflated with the bulk of Dark Horse's run on Conan, which was great. Dark Horse really acquitted themselves well with Conan the Barbarian, starting with issue number 0, which was a free comic book giveaway, and I've read it, I've shown it to you many, many times. But moving on from there, Dark Horse has a really good history with Conan the Barbarian. And they might have gone on having a really good history with Conan the Barbarian, except for a force that entered into comic books right around 2012. A little bit before that, and then it became virulent and all-ruling. And I bet some of you who are accustomed to Epic Comic Book Wednesday are going to think that I'm talking about the Stan Lee virus. This is the comic that we're talking about, by the way. That's a part of the cover of issue number 1 of this particular run, chapter 1 of this particular run. The Stan Lee virus is something I've identified on Epic Comic Book Wednesday ad nauseum. It's a thing that was introduced by Stan Lee into Marvel Comics, took over the whole comic book industry, which it introduced 2 elements, verisimilitude and continuity. So continuity means that your characters remember the events that they had, the experiences that they had 10 issues ago, and maybe learned from them, maybe are different because of them. And verisimilitude is, well, this is all real. It's all taking place in the world. So, you know, if you're going to have the buildings of New York City bend like spoons because an alien makes them do that, then you're going to have to do 10 follow-up issues on all the psychological trauma that induces and whatnot. Utterly ridiculous. Continuity and verisimilitude are utterly ridiculous in superhero comic books. But I am the only person, pretty much, today, that laments the Stan Lee virus. And I don't lament it completely, because as I've freely admitted, I've shown you over and over again on Wednesdays, the Stan Lee virus gave rise to a whole bunch of great stories. So I am not talking about that. That is not the thing that happened to the comic book industry. That happened decades and decades ago. No, the thing that I'm talking about is much more recent than that, and far more serious. We can have all sorts of playful discussions about the Stan Lee virus and whether or not it created great stories. Obviously, it did. The Dark Phoenix saga, for instance, is a perfect example of what the Stan Lee virus can do when it's done well. I'm perfectly willing to admit that. Now, the phenomenon that I'm talking about today is not fun. It's not lighthearted, and there is no way in good faith to both sides it. It is pure negative. And it goes by an acronym. I always joke that Hannah of Hannah's Books is loving these comic book videos. She actually knows nothing at all about comic books, but it's kind of fun to joke like that. But the thing that happened to comics goes under a sobriquet that is going to be painful for her. And believe it or not, it's going to be just as painful for me. SJW. Leftist progressivism. Fake progressivism is the thing I'm talking about that happened to comics right around 2012. I'm sure that some of you are old enough to remember what this was like at its worst. It wasn't at its worst in 2012, but it got epically bad. And the reason that I hate the name for it, SJW stands for Social Justice Warrior, and we should all be warriors for social justice. The leftist, extreme leftist ideologue, well, once upon a time, for decades, that stood for wanting equality in the world, for wanting an end to war and injustice, for wanting an end to poverty and all that sort of stuff. And once upon a time, that's what it stood for. And of course, those are all good things. Nevertheless, I'm using the language as it has been co-opted by the phenomenon. And social justice warrior was quickly abbreviated to SJW as a purely negative term for purely negative people. I'm not saying that any innocents are being tarred by a wrong label here. I'm saying that people are horrible. Absolutely horrible. They gave rise to an entire cottage industry of YouTube channels specifically devoted to calling them the worst people in the world. And unfortunately, and probably inevitably, most of those YouTube channels were run by the worst people in the world, the people who are even worse. It's what you get when you start to weaponize personal identity. And that's what the SJW movement is. It's weaponized personal identity. It's blue-haired pronoun-wielding activists who like to shame people, like to attack people, like to mob on people, like to cancel people. That was the big headline-grabbing thing on Today and whatnot was, what about cancel culture? Well, that all came from this movement. And the people, the blue-haired pronoun-slinging activists at the heart of this, what we'll call the SJW movement, are like a giant swarm of locusts. They land on a field, they tear it to shreds, and then when there's nothing left, they all rise up at the same time and move on to the next field. Now, when a locust swarm does that, you're not thinking that the locust swarm is landing on that first field because they like the taste of the crops. At all. They are mindless engines of destruction. And the same thing is true of SJWs. They, in the pejorative sense that we'll be using the term for this ranty video, the same thing is true for them. They are engines of pure destruction. So they find something, a hobby, a franchise, an ideological property. They find something that they don't care about at all. Never knew anything about it, don't want to know anything about it. They only know that you care about it. They swarm on it. They destroy it by tearing up all the essence of what makes it alive, remaking it in their temporary obsessions, and then moving on when nothing's left. And then they go on to something else. And that phenomenon, that SJW cancel culture, purity testing, identity politics driven phenomenon, has laid waste to popular culture. Far more than just comic books. It is a gigantic phenomenon, the likes of which people will be studying in a century. They won't be saying, oh, well, there were some upheavals in popular culture and there were some interesting things and some not interesting things. They'll say, no, there's a fire break here. There was popular culture, and then it was destroyed by successive hordes of SJW locusts. Think of any pop culture IP that you want. Think of any of them, virtually any of them, and you will see something that was good until these creatures destroyed it. It isn't that it was good until somebody took a risk or somebody left a studio or money ran out. No, the thing that causes it to stop being good is always the same thing. It's always this Twitter mob of idiots who only want to destroy the thing because they know the people they think are on the wrong side of history like it. That's all. So they get into positions of staggering power. They get into control of movie studios. You get into control of a movie studio, you hire a director who is a fellow SJW, not your friend. They don't make friends. You hire a director who's your fellow SJW. That director has the ability, with state-of-the-art technology, state-of-the-art special effects, and a ton of money, that director has the ability to bring Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and Han Solo together in a Star Wars movie one last time. To bring the actors together in a Star Wars movie all at one time in an uplifting story. And what do those directors do? Kill them all separately, without ever having any time with each other, without ever uplifting anything. They just sort of die. And before they die, we know perfectly well, before they die, it is made clear that the men have completely betrayed anything they once stood for. SJWs hate men. They hate valor. They hate heroism. They hate sacrifice. They hate all of that stuff. They hate it. And they, like clockwork, attack it whenever they land like a locust cloud on any new hobby or IP. Once they get there, they achieve the power to manipulate that IP, and then they destroy those things. Get rid of them completely. Some of you don't follow comics. I imagine, as I always say, I don't imagine anyone who doesn't follow comics would watch these videos, but if you don't follow comics, even you will know will have heard distantly. Then when it comes to the two big superhero comic companies, so in other words, not Dark Horse, I'm not fanatic Conan, we will get to this, but I have to lay the scene first of why this is the way it is. Even if you don't follow comics, you will have heard distantly that when it comes to the two big superhero companies, DC and Marvel, basically the 2025 criticism of them, tossed off by people who don't know that much, but it's not all that inaccurate, is everybody's gay. Yeah, pretty much. And far worse than that, everybody's silly. These creatures, these SJW locusts that attach to something, they do not care about it. And they view the obligation to learn about it as knuckling under to the Rhodesian colonizing patriarchy. It's a point of pride to them not to learn about it. It's not just that they don't care about it, it's that they don't want to learn anything about it either. And so all of a sudden you have a standard crew of comic book creators, and they are told, you're all on the wrong side of history, you're quasi-Nazis, you're, say it with me now, literally worse than Hitler. We're replacing all of you. We're going to relaunch this book with a new creative team searching for a new audience. Because it's not just that we want to give a new creative team to this IP. We also don't like anybody who likes it. And we have sold to our masters, our money people, the delusion that there's a gigantic paying alternate audience out there who's just waiting for us to make the virtuous product. And then they will swarm to the movie theaters. Then they will swarm to the comic shops. Doesn't happen. Doesn't happen. That alternate audience does not exist. But if you allow a locust horde of SJWs onto an IP that is beloved, no matter what it is, Terminator, Birds of Prey, Predator, oh God, I could go on and on and on. That's not even talking about comic books. If you allow them in there, and you allow them free reign, and you also allow them to call their core audience vicious names on social media, and you don't rein them in at all, well, as I've said before in comic book videos, the result of that is going to be extremely predictable. You are going to alienate 99% of your paying customers, and the comic book industry has done that. And it started around the time of this comic, around 2012, when all of a sudden, savagely stupid ideological drones started being given control of things like Captain America or Thor or Iron Man or whatever. They started being given control of these things. So I don't know anything about Captain America. I've never read a Captain America comic book, but I do know that he's a straight white man who stands for the best of America. And I hate every element of that. I hate all of that. I don't know why I hate it, but I do. I'm not going to examine why I hate it. All I want to do is destroy it. I'll use fancy terms like subverting expectations or defeating the male gaze. I'll use terms like that, but really it's just hatred. I hate this. I'm not going to examine why I hate it, and you have given me unsupervised control of it. So I'm going to create a story in which Captain America is a Nazi, and always has been. Not a fake, not a dream, not a hoax, not an imaginary story, that Steve Rogers, Captain America, has always been a member of Hydra. And you might say, well, okay, doesn't that completely destroy the character, this character that's 90 years old? Doesn't that completely destroy the character? And your answer will be twofold. One, well, I'm barely going to show up to work. I'm going to give lip to all of my bosses online, in public, on social media. So I'm not going to be around in a year to care whether or not I've destroyed the character. But two, I want to destroy the character. I don't like anything about this. So I want to destroy it. So you can't, there's no criticism that you're leveling against these people that will work. The Marvel's X-Men are already doing the SJW thing. They are a hunted minority. Well, then once you give these locusts control of the X-Men books, what will they do? Aside from making every X-Men gay, what will they do? Well, how about we put the shoe on the other foot? How about we have the X-Men become xenophobic race warriors, mutant supremacists? How about we make them that way? We don't care that it's not consistent with anything about them for the last 60 years. We don't care that the few remaining diehard fans will hate it and raise a ruckus because we don't like them. We want a different audience. But that audience isn't there. Doesn't buy comics, thinks comics are dumb. And the creators do too. Pew, pew. They think that regardless of what the characters are like, and the characters are all the same, they're all author self-inserts, the comics themselves are dumb. Who takes this seriously? Nobody takes comic books seriously. Uh, that attitude was brought into Dark Horse and Marvel and DC. DC fell last, I think, but it was brought into Marvel and Dark Horse and DC and a whole bunch of other comics, a whole bunch of indie comics, by the vanguard of SJWs. And Brian Wood was one of those. Very much so. I'm not saying he hasn't done good work. DMZ is really, really good work. Northlanders is really, really good work. But they aren't superhero comics. They're his own creations. They're not him trying to respect or further the legacy of someone else's creation. They're his own stuff. But he was given somebody else's creation. He was given Conan the Barbarian. And he was one of the worst of the SJWs. And always running his mouth about how the whole of the comic book industry, especially the superhero comic book industry, and Conan is superhero adjacent, have always been just sinkholes of vicious patriarchy. And that maybe we need to subvert that. Maybe we need to do that. Maybe we need to subvert that. And much like Captain America, and don't get me started on Thor, Conan was seen as a trophy, a big game trophy. I'm out here with my gun and I'm looking for a trophy, but I know the ones I really want. I know the ones I really want, the really big ones, the ones that celebrate problem-solving, effective, white, heterosexual men in leadership positions. So not doofuses, not bumbling clods. There are a handful of cultural icons that fit that bill. Thor, Captain America especially, Superman, Batman, Conan, James Tiberius Kirk. We want to tear them down. They're the biggest heads we want on our wall. Now, Brian Wood wouldn't admit to any of this if you asked him. But he was there spouting his virtue signaling pap right from the beginning when he was given Conan the Barbarian. The worst matchup in the world. And like all SJWs, he did not factor in the fact that because SJWs make no friends, and because they only know how to do two things they learned in grade school on the recess ground. They know how to name call, and they know how to tattle. That's all they know how to do. They don't know how to create. They don't know nuance. They don't know how to empathize. They know how to name call. You're a racist. You're other things, as we'll get to. And they know how to tattle. It's not just that I think you're a racist. It's that I want your bosses to know that you're a racist. And I want every other boss you have for the rest of your life to know that you're a racist. Whether you are or not. I'm going to call you the name and then we're going to tattle on you. That's the only thing that these creatures know how to do. And what Brian Wood forgot, as so many people have forgotten, is that they're going to do it to you. You can virtue signal till you're blue in the face. They're going to do it to you. And sure enough, he was two separate, at least two that I know of, completely false accusations of sexual harassment were leveled at him. Took a big, gigantic rhino horn swipe out of his career. He was years recovering from those allegations. I don't know if he has fully recovered from them now. And I don't know if he regrets it. That's the alt-right pipeline is made from people like that who are gored to pieces by people they thought were on their side. I've strayed far afield. The key reflection here is that once these people got a hold of major comic book IPs, they completely destroyed them by subverting expectations and defeating the male gaze. I don't want men to like looking at this. I don't want women to like looking at it. I want a different audience. If you think comic books are about heroics and cliffhangers and excitement and good winning over evil, then I don't want you as a reader. I don't want you as a customer. And I'm going to tell you that many times a day on social media in full view of my bosses who are going to let me do it. As a result, a very predictable result, you are going to stop reading these things. And as a result, mainstream superhero comic book industry has lost 90% of its paying audience. It's a dead industry. No one buys these things. 1,000 copies sell of a major title, Spider-Man or the X-Men. 1,000 copies sell a month. Maybe. The figures were actually, the companies that whose job it was to report the sales figures stopped doing it during the height of the SJW reign of terror because critics could point to cratering sales and say, well, you aren't good for the industry. And rather than change what was bad for the industry, they just stopped reporting it. So now it's self-reported numbers from Marvel and DC saying how many copies they've shipped to comic book shops. How many copies did we ship? No reflection on what's sold. I believe because what's sold, you could pay for yourself. I believe what's sold is almost non-existent. I don't think you have to look any further than the back stacks of your local comic book store, which are full, absolutely full of unsold comics. This kind of ideologically poisoned stuff, no traditional comic book fan wants. No traditional comic book fan wants it, and there are no non-traditional comic book fans. You alienated your audience. 99% of your audience has simply stopped having comics as a weekly part of their life. Many of you have asked over the years. You've asked me. I don't know if you've asked Mike. Many of you have asked over the years. You two are always talking about comic books every Wednesday. We look forward to it, but you never talk about the comics you got that week. You never talk about your pull list, which was a phenomenon where you would go to you'd get to know the guy who owns your local comic shop, and you would give him a list of the things you want that are coming out in every week and every month. He would put them aside for you, and in some comic shops also give you a discount for being a locked-in, loyal customer. Most comic book fans have had pull lists in their life. I've had them many times with 4 or 5 different shops in Iowa, in Austin, in Boston. I don't anymore, and I wouldn't dream of it. And Mike wouldn't either. We disagree on a lot about comics, but the reason neither one of us has a pull list is because modern superhero comics are absolutely awful. And the reason for that is very simple. It's that both the major superhero companies have been completely ideologically captured. And they will die. They will kill the industry rather than go. They will kill it rather than go. There have been meetings at Marvel, probably the similar meetings at DC, where creative teams, sub-editors, and also the editor in charge of a particular title or a particular family of titles have heard that fans hate what they're doing. In other words, the letters and the emails are all negative, no positives. The fans hate what we're doing. There have been meetings like that, developmental meetings at Marvel anyway that I know of, where all around the table there have been self-satisfied smiles and laughters and people saying good. So that's kamikaze. You not only have SJW scum running and ruining these IPs, but they are kamikazes. They want to destroy their own industry. And so I don't think between us, Mike and I, could find one, maybe 2 ongoing series. He seems to like the new Titan Comics Conan titles more than I do, and I get the impression from other people that maybe that run on Conan the Barbarian, the current run on Conan the Barbarian, has more high points than I first saw. I might have to rectify that with a trade paperback. But Marvel and DC? No. No. You need only look at Marvel's latest cartoon, Marvel's latest animated series, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. You need only look at that to see that the SJW zealots, ideological zealots, are alive and well at the company. What's true in animation is definitely true in the comics as well. Look at Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Look at one episode of it. And you'll see exactly what I mean. It is an SJW fever dream, right down to blatant gaslighting. Just blatantly telling you that your eyes are not seeing what they're seeing. Peter Parker's best friend, Harry Osborn, in the cartoon, in this animated series that I'm talking about, is drawn, voiced, and animated as a young black woman. And everyone in the entire show refers to him as a young man. That is not what your eyes are seeing. That is what SJWs do. We're subverting expectations. We're also making you question, are you really sure about anything, you Nazi scum? That caused me to leave Weekly Comics pretty quick. And I had a longer history with Weekly Comics than any of the people who were editing them at the time. And once I realized that the writers, editors, and artists of these things actively hated me, well, I've got a million back issues I can read and enjoy. I do not need to read new stuff. So they lost my business. And many in 2012, 2013, 2016, many other people went online, either on social media or on YouTube channels, and said, you know, I used to give you $25, $40, $50 a week. And that number is now 0 because of you. That number is now 0. I don't want to read Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel. You introduced the character. You gave her own book. It wasn't good. The character's not interesting. I didn't read it. I didn't want to keep reading it. Neither did anybody else I knew. It didn't sell in comic shops. And what did you do? You relaunched it. Same creative crew. Like, basically just telling fans, no, whether you like this or not, you're gonna read it. We're gonna keep making it because we're writing your scum. So they relaunched it. No, I'm sorry. They didn't relaunch it. They relaunched it 10 times. 0 sales. All 10 times. It's just a comic book company dedicated to hating you, saying, look, we're going to keep serving this to you. We can do this all day. You're scum, and we're producing something that's on the right side of history. So you either like it, or, well, we'll just eat the deficit. No problem by us. Uh, that is still true. Very much still true in the world of superhero comic books. I feel certain that that is why Michael K. Vaughan and I don't have pull lists, and why you never hear about new releases from us. The YouTube channels I watch that talk about new releases in Marvel and DC are what the neck-bearded quasi-fascists refer to as shill channels. People are going to praise what they're seeing anyway, regardless. They don't care. They're going to love it all anyway. They're not going to bring anything critical to it. Those are the channels that are still getting these things, and I'm pretty sure they're it. I'm pretty sure that's all. Oh, goodness. And that brings us, after 30 minutes, to the subject of this video. The only reason I'm taking that long is because the subject of the video itself is not going to take much time. This run on Conan was done by Brian Wood, who does not understand Conan, doesn't like him, doesn't want you to like him, doesn't care about it at all. He has a message to do. He has a whole bunch of SJW stuff he wants to do. He doesn't care about any of this except that Conan is a big trophy to put on the wall. If I can emasculate Conan, if I can de-effectualize him, if I can make him a bumbler, well, great. That's a win for Rosa Parks. That's a win for the right side of history. And that's what he and Becky Cloonan just proceed to do in these first issues. And they rub salt in the wound by adapting one of the most beloved Conan stories that Robert E. Howard ever wrote, Queen of the Black Coast, in which a young Conan, admittedly young, but we'll see, not this young, in which a young Conan meets a pirate queen named Baylit, who is notorious along the whole coast of a continent as a ferocious leader of a corsair band. Conan is fleeing from justice in a city. He has been arrested. He doesn't think that he was guilty. He expresses his insistence on his innocence by splitting the skull of the judge and stealing the head MP's horse. He runs for the docks, thinking that's the only way I'm going to get away, and jumps on board a vessel and is accepted on that vessel. They are a trading vessel. They aren't dangerous. They take him on board. He lives with them for a while, and they tell him stories about Baylit. They tell him stories about this fearsome pirate queen. And then, sure enough, they find her. She finds them. And there's a pitched battle, and all of them die except Conan. But he has so impressed Baylit with his prowess, with his thews, that she wants him to be her queen, her king. She wants him as a co-leader of her crew and also in her bed. And Robert E. Howard makes very short work of this. It's a very good story. When he's good, he's really good. Here, Michael K. Vaughan, if he gets this far, I'll say, isn't he always really good? When Robert E. Howard is good, he's really good. Queen of the Black Coast is a masterpiece of weird, hard, adult epic fantasy. And it ends as well. The ending of the story, Queen of the Black Coast, is amazingly good. It's amazingly touching. The whole story of it is. It's one of the half dozen stories that Robert E. Howard wrote that can stand next to Tower of the Elephant. So it rubs salt in the wound that Brian Wood would pick this story to adapt, knowing what he was going to be doing to it. And it starts right away. Because we get Conan fleeing from those outraged soldiers. But that is Conan. Now, this is a young Conan. In this part of his mythos, this is a young Conan. But I don't know what that is. I have no idea what that is. That facial expression, the emphasis given to it, notice no words at all. This is clearly meant to make a point. It's the second thing we see in this story. It's clearly meant to say, here you go. Hope your expectations are subverted. Conan makes it to the ship. That's not how you jump. That's not how you would do this, but Brian Wood has never jumped in his life, so, and Becky Cloonan certainly hasn't. That's what I mean. This is silly. That is meant to be silly. It's meant to look silly. You wouldn't run with your sword in your hand like that and lop your own ear off while you're... It's meant to be silly. And it's also meant to underscore that comics are inherently dumb. When Conan hits the deck of the ship, the sound effect is thud. When Conan swings out his sword, the sound effect is swoosh. the sound effects are the thing that cliche writing would make them. There's no attempt made to be anything else. I have heard praise for Becky Cloonan's art, even when these issues were coming out. Some people were praising them. I've never seen it myself. It looks very lazy to me. But this is Conan. That lanky-haired kid is Conan. He tells the story. Look at this. That's supposed to be Conan. He sounds like he just got back from a concert, dude. He tells them his story of how he came here, and they tell him, well, okay, great. And then he talks some more with the captain over what looked to me like Heineken bottles. They don't look like anything that would happen in the Hyborian age. Notice that it's all so lazy, sloppy, stupid, condescending artwork. That is a ship in a tsunami. It's just, Becky Cloonan is thinking, well, it's a ship, you need waves. Ugh. And they, I don't know how to stress this. I haven't seen Mike's video yet. I can't believe he's going to like this. He suggested it, but he didn't talk about it. I can't believe he likes this. He's too much of a Conan fan. I'll have to watch and see. I'll have egg on my face if he does. But they just keep talking. This is a comic book that you paid $5 for. They just keep talking. And this is Brian Wood's way of subverting expectations. When you read a Conan comic book, you're expecting lots of action. So I won't give it to you. I know you want it. I know it's right for the character, and that's why I won't give it to you. Because I don't like you. I don't care what you like. I don't care what you're expecting. I want a different audience. It's not out there. It doesn't exist. But I believe that it does, and I want them. So I'm going to write this for them, where people talk and sip chai latte. So he has subverted your expectations, and he's also subverted your expectations visually, because his Conan is a puny twerp. But what about defeating the male gaze? We know what's coming up. Belit is a seductive leader of a pirate band. When Roy Thomas, the great comic book writer Roy Thomas, very loosely adapted this period of Conan's life 50 years ago for Marvel Comics, he gave us a very sultry Belit. A very effective visual presentation. Roy Thomas made the inspired decision way back when Marvel first had the rights to Conan the Barbarian, that I will have Conan meet Belit in exactly the story, the way the Queen of Black Coast opens. But then they will have adventures. Years worth of adventures. I won't hurry to the ending the way Robert E. Howard does. I will give them years of adventures. And it works really, really well. It changes the comic, definitely. It gives Conan someone to bounce dialogue off. It gives us a different point of view. It's wonderful, though. Absolutely wonderful. But there's no possibility that Becky Cloonan is going to do that. None whatsoever. She is a dyed-in-the-wool SJW. She's going to want to defeat the male gaze. So in addition to giving us a twerpy Conan, she gives us a Belit who is a vampire. No explanation given at all in the text. Here, in this part with the wavy break lines there, it could maybe be understood that the captain is describing her as more than human. But she stays looking like that. He's describing her that way, but when we see her for real, that's what she looks like. We get scenes of Conan in a top knot, no bigger than any of the men around him, just helping out with whatever work needs to be done. Not his pecs are flabbing a little, like you do if you miss the gym 2 weeks in a row. Has no abs, no shoulders, no nothing. Just another guy. Just happens to be a guy named Conan, or even a gal named Conan. We get scenes like this, and I want to stress, it's more talking. Lots and lots more talking. But eventually we get to see again, and we get Belit. Eventually, we know that if this story follows anything like the actual Robert E. Howard story, eventually Conan's going to have to meet this person. And when he does, in real life, she is still a crazed vampire. This is straight lines for the borders. This is not someone remembering her or telling tall tales about her. She just looks like that. Dead corpse skin, crazy eyes, tongue lolling out of her mouth. And the reason for that is to defeat the male gaze. That's what the reason is. No matter what Becky Cloonan will say today, no matter what Brian Wood might say today, if he's allowed in the room, no matter what these people would say today, That's the reason for this. Becky Cloonan's idea, probably in collaboration with Brian Wood, was, well, we have to make her a pirate queen, but let's make them feel dirty for finding her attractive. Let's make her look like she's dead, like a dead body. So that, we can't control what they're expecting, but we can make them hate themselves. And that's wonderful. That's a paid day. And she just keeps looking like that, drooling out of her mouth. Her eyes change color, but the main thing is the exhumed corpse skin tone. And gradually, very slowly, look at how slow these pages move. Gradually, well, yeah, her pirate crew catches up with Conan's crew and kills everybody on board, just like in the story. It took John Buscema 70 or 50 years ago 3 panels to do this. It takes Brian Wood 3 issues to do this, that you're paying a lot of money for. And in addition to, a little bit disturbing here, I don't mean to cast aspersions. I've never met Brian Wood, never talked to him. I just know what kind of a creature he is, if he still is. He might have learned his lesson. Most people who get turned on by the mob they're trying to appease do learn their lesson. Maybe he did. But in addition to making, it might be Becky Cloonan, it might be all on her. In addition to making Belit an exhumed corpse, she also, for some reason, makes her black corsairs monsters. Those aren't people. Those aren't people. Those are monsters. They don't have any eyes. Their skin is coarse, burnished wood. That's not how you draw black people. That's not how anybody draws black people. A little bit unnerving that she makes Belit's crew into monsters with stone skin. That's a little bit unnerving. I don't know quite what's going on there, but the story, see, look at that. What is that? What is that? That's supposed to be a black man. They're just sitting there out in the middle of the page in plain view. Is Becky Cloonan just signaling, I don't think that black people are human? I have no idea. But I've never been able to come up with a reason for that. I notice he's in a lot better shape than Conan is. The climactic moment, happens when Conan finally meets Belit, and she can easily have her crew kill him. But instead she decides, I like what I see, I want to ally myself with him. This is that climactic moment. Who is that guy? I don't have any idea who that guy is. I never in a million years would you think that was Conan. Even if you weren't raised on the Roy Thomas John Buscema adaptation, you still wouldn't think it. More of her monster crew. We're never told that these beings have supernatural origin, but that's not what humans look like. So, but boy, oh boy, isn't he pretty? Huh? He is pretty. Belit, the exhumed corpse, the vampire, decides that she wants Conan as her lover. Make me your queen. That's a whole page. And he doesn't look happy about that. And why? I think this panel could easily be coded to be saying something about Conan that Brian Wood never says and never would say. He knows perfectly well that if he explicitly said some of the things that he wants about Conan, he'd be fired from the job. I mean, franchises like this it's not anything goes. And it goes on from there, and you get exactly what you would expect. You get crappy artwork, everybody out of character, especially Conan, and lots of messaging. Lots and lots of subtle messaging. And it's all bad messaging. It's all SJW messaging. It's the end of comic books. That's what this heralded. This was 2012. And obviously, Conan fans who saw a Conan and a Belit like that stopped buying the comic. There was a little bit of forward momentum, a little bit of checking with its head cut off in 2012, 2011. There was a little bit of forward momentum. Fans would still buy the Avengers, even though they were being told in every issue, you're the bad guy. We don't like you. Fans would still buy Captain America, even though when Captain America foils a mind control plan that turns all of the American Midwest into Nazis, it turns out the big reveal at the end is that there was no mind control. They just are that way. You'd keep buying Captain America. You'd get to a scene like that and think, okay, that was not only a bad reveal, but I feel personally insulted, and you were meant to. You were absolutely meant to. That just kept happening. I think that if I remember correctly, you could ask Mike this. You're getting a rant for this video. You'll get a better video from him. I think Mike could confirm this. I'm pretty sure that Dark Horse did sort of pull the plug on all of this SJW crap after a little while, probably when sales cratered. It was too late by then. I don't think it lasted very long, and that was just Conan, who is lucky. He is exempted from the worst of this because he's an independent IP. He's an independent franchise. So if Robert E. Howard Incorporated doesn't like what a company is doing, well, they can wait out the franchise, make lots of trouble. Maybe it's in breach of some fine print in the contract. They can certainly recover. It sounds to me like Titan Books is recovering Conan as an IP. Great. It'd be great if they did. They should. And it would be great also because if they are doing that, if they are recovering Conan, if they're giving us a big, towering brute of Conan, then I guarantee you the sales are reflecting that. They might not say it because they don't want to be canceled, because they don't want to be called names. They don't want tattling, and they don't want name calling. But I guarantee you if that's what they're doing, then the sales are reflecting it. It wasn't true in the first issue of the new Savage Sword of Conan that I reviewed on this channel. Nothing like that. The first issue of the Titan book Savage Sword of Conan was a SJW fever dream. Every possible thing that you could expect, they did. I have been told by some people that Conan the Barbarian, the color comic book that they do, is not as bad and has had highlights since then. I've even been told that Savage Sword of Conan is a little better now. It's been my policy with once I know that a company is infected with SJWs, and keep in mind, if there's even one, you're infected. You have to get rid of them all. It's not enough to find out which weirdo you've got on your staff and simply reassign them to the mailroom. You've got to walk them out of the building. You've got to fire them all. Can't keep even one. It's been my policy that once I learn that a company is infected, I stop completely. I did that Savage Sword of Conan as an indulgence, but I usually don't go back. They don't recover. They don't ever learn their lesson. They don't ever improve. They don't ever like you as a customer. They don't want you as a customer. They hate you. But I could, I suppose, buy the next issue of Savage Sword of Conan to see if it's any better. And I could buy a few of Titan Comics' ongoing Conan. But this, the Brian Wood Conan is a perfect example of what ruined the industry. Not just at the big two, but also at Dark Horse. It's a perfect example of that. So that now, if a comic book in any company is actually good month to month, a good month-to-month comic, it will be an incredible rarity. Comic book fans that have long since left the industry will hear about it and maybe even be a little tempted. I don't know. Whereas once upon a time, and I'm sure that Mike has memories like this too, you would go to the comic shop and get the latest Adventure Comics, the latest Avengers, the latest Fantastic Four, latest Thor, the latest Superman. You'd have a little stack of comics. You would do that every week. Those are ancient memories now. Nobody does that, I don't think. Anyway, that's our comic for today. The SJW Conan that I had forgotten about. I had blocked it out of my memory. Mike had to remind me that this thing existed. When he mentioned Dark Horse Conan, I thought, well, we've already talked about Dark Horse Conan with Carrie Nord artwork, but I'll gladly do it again. It's so good. Kurt Busiek doing the writing. I'll gladly talk about that till the cows come home. But no, he meant a dark period in the character's adaptation history. But anyway, that's your comic for today. Sorry for the length. I will wrap this up for now. Hope for sunnier pastures next week. Thank you, BookTube.